1, call to order open session. I'd like to call to order the September 21st, 2023 Governing Board of Trustees Special Meetings Governance Workshop at 5:02 p.m. 2.1 approval agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion to approve the agenda passes. 3.1 public input concerning items on the agenda. Is there any public input concerning items on the agenda? There is. Let's see. Persons wishing to address the board on any closed session item. Persons wishing to address the board on any closed session item except personnel items are invited to do so at this time. In the interest of time and order, presentations to the public are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic. If you wish to speak, complete a blue speaker slip, locate at the back of the room, and present it to the secretary of the board prior to the start of the meeting. When the board president invites you to the podium, please state your name before making a presentation. And we have one, Genevieve Goldstone.
Try to speak up. There are 3 DMUSD parents who couldn't be here tonight, but they emailed me and asked me to speak on their behalf. So this is from the first parent. As a Hills parent, I'm aware of current and projected enrollment numbers in the district, and I've seen the size of the Heights project. I want to know how the district intends to keep both Hills and Heights open as functioning schools. Not vague promises or assurances, specific details about how the district intends to make this happen. For the second parent, given that the Hills and Heights were both expected to be small schools of about the same size, how is it fair, reasonable, fiscally responsible for the district to build the Heights so big while cutting back on the promised upgrades to the Hills? And then third parent, got a lot of emails. This parent would like to remind everyone that Measure MM funds must specifically be used for schools. They can't be spent on a district office and training center. Many people want to know if the district plans to close the Hills and use the facility for something other than a school. Some think the land will be sold to the city for affordable housing. This is a public school district and the public has the right to know. And then finally, this is my question. Is the budget for the Hills reload related to the fact that Mr. Mock and Ms. Lee were in my 5th grade son's classroom today commenting on his and Ms. Parker's math?
4.1 board approval attendance at the CASC conference and Expo 2023.
We actually needed to bring this forward because this conference came up and we don't have another board meeting before this conference actually occurs. So Jenny, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. We received a request for attendance after the deadline to put it into the last board meeting, and the conference occurs before the next board meeting.
Anybody have any other questions?
It's the California School Counselors Conference, and we have a request from 2 counselors to attend.
So the request came from within our district.
Yes.
And the location?
Riverside.
Is there a motion to approve? Second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. And 5, the governance workshop, 5.1 governance workshop, capital programs and measure.
Great, thank you. So we will be, per what we've been talking about, conducting 2 workshops over the next 2 months, beginning with tonight's workshop on capital programs and Measure MM, and in alignment with Destination 2028, and the long-range objective 3.4 specifically talks about maximize the impact of Measure MM bond funds at all district schools to address facilities needs, community priorities, and student learning. We will be discussing the future of our facilities program tonight as well as where we are right now. So as we know, our district is committed to engaging in proactive, fiscally responsible, multi-year planning in order to maintain a prudent budget and a strong reserve. So this thoughtful approach by the district, by the board, the vision to budgeting and planning really does underpin all of our decision making. So now I'll bring in Krista Argenti, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, to continue with providing the board information.
Thank you. This evening we will be looking at 3 objectives for the workshop. We will be looking at understanding the current reality of our district facilities program. We'll We'll talk about and discuss some unforeseen and potential needs, and then we'll review enrollment and capacity updates and discuss potential budget impacts. And we'll have Tiana Hart, my Director of Fiscal Services, will be part of the presentation, and Brian Stanley, Assistant Superintendent of HR. So we have an agenda too. This breaks it down into those chunks of the objectives. Within facilities, we're going to go over the vision for the facilities program and the original budgeted costs and bond series timelines, some updated budgeted costs and bond series timelines, and potentially unfunded projects. And then we'll look at other funds as well outside of the bond and how that impacts and builds in. We'll look at the, as we said, unforeseen and potential needs like satellite kitchens at our school sites, some other potential unforeseen needs, and then the unforeseen of the pandemic and some of those resulting financial situations that play into this. And then we'll talk about enrollment and capacity updates with enrollment scenarios, as we've discussed the last couple of board meetings, as well as the potential impact into staffing, and then the potential impact to facilities.
And Chris, just a foreshadow of the enrollment scenarios, are we going to cover that sensitivity analysis that was discussed a couple of
Yeah,
minutes?
so we looked at 3 different scenarios to give some range from the lowest end to what would be the highest likely end, and something in between. So in October of 2020, we had a board trustees meeting, and we shared an update on our A, B, C, and D bond. So we're going to use that to set the original budget and to show, sort of capture point in time about 3 years ago where we were. At that time, these are slides from that presentation where we did an update on our series A, B, C, and D major projects, talked about potential timeline impact and associated with delays, and the financial impact associated with delays. If you remember, 3 years ago, this was a couple months after the initial litigation against the Delmar Heights school rebuild. And so even at that time, we saw that there were the potential for delays and that could have potential impacts to the bond program. So at that time, we knew that Series A, we had sold Series A bonds. We had the $55 million. We had not yet sold Series B, C, or D. And we knew that Series A, we were looking at our Delmar High School rebuild, Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9 at that time, had yet to name the school, and Torrey Hills field upgrades. We had previously shared with the board in 2019 Series B, and so we were updating at this point that our potential Series B was going to have the finishing off of Delmar Heights, Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, and we had intended to have Delmar Hills Academy's modernization and Carmel Del Mar's modernization in Series B. But even in 2020, we knew that there could be a delay. We knew we'd already going to have this delay of the start for Delmar Hills, and we also knew that Carmel Del Mar could be pushed into Series C. At that time, we also knew that there were potential delays. And I also note, at that time, when we were first starting out with the bond, we had some projects that we were pulling out. And so you'll see solar installation, which we have now installed into a modernization. On the next slide, we have technology infrastructure and front office upgrades. We separated those out, but as we started modernization, started work, we realized that going into a school and modernizing them, and going back for a front office upgrade, and going back for technology infrastructure is going to be more impactful. So we've rearranged a little bit into making it one impact to the school site other than our classroom modernizations over the summer. So there's a little bit of difference between our original proposed to our updated budgeting, but you'll see that we had up through those final projects in Series D. And the other thing that we were sharing at this time was potential impacts. In 2020, we talked a little bit about delays in our initial projects and how that could impact the long-term planning. We were looking at escalation at 4% per year since the very beginning of the pandemic, and so we'd yet to start really realizing the escalation of 8, 10, and 12% that we were seeing year over year. And 4% was a budgeted number we used all the way up until the pandemic because it was what you were seeing on average for the previous 15 to 20 years. And then we were talking about our capital improvement. So at that time, just looking at Measure MM projects, we have budgets for the projects that were laid out. We had series that we were expecting. From Measure MM specifically, we had $5.4 million that was unfunded, but we had other funds that we could use for that related to Fund 40, some CFD money, etc. And we're just looking at Measure MM at this point. So this is where we were in 2020. And now as we update to today, we have, we'll update as our A, B, C, and D with Measure MM. And with Series A, we have spent that bond completely. We were able to use it on the Dartmouth Heights School rebuild, Pacific Sky School. Torrey Hills Field upgrade. We also did a number of classroom modernizations and playground replacements with Series A. It's then moved into Series B, and as you know, we sold our Series B bonds, and we're able to start with $64 million so that we can continue the Del Mar High School rebuild, finish Pacific Sky School, and move into the current Del Mar Hills Academy modernization, as well as continue with the classroom modernizations that we prioritize so that we can impact schools across the district, and playground replacements, which we will be finishing outside of Del Mar Hills and Del Mar Heights, which are being finished outside of the bond this next summer. Yeah.
So the Series A, what was the total amount?
55.7 million.
And then Series B?
64. And we have a remaining authorization of a little over $66 million for C and D combined.
Can you break it out? Is it just how we break it out?
We decide how we break it up. We would anticipate breaking it out somewhere around half. So it could be 30 to 35 million for Series C, and then the remainder for Series D.
You said 64.
66. As we look at the budget that we have, and then we broke this up, we really just split it in half to do a C and D for this one. So there we have approximately 33 million in each of these Series C and D. And with that in mind, we would be able to finish Del Mar Hills, do Carmel Del Mar in Series C, finish our classroom modernizations, do Ashley Falls, and start Sage Canyon with Series D. And we would have the remainder of Sage Canyon and Torrey Hills, Sycamore Ridge, and Ocean Air unfunded through Measure MM. We'll talk about the other funds because it's not just Measure MM that we have to use, but to give a context of it, looking at what Measure MM would use, we just use Measure MM first.
Sorry, can you repeat again what that was?
Say that again?
Can you just repeat that again?
So this means that if we just use Measure MM funds, this is where we would run out. We do have other funds that we will list in a couple of slides, and we'll go through. These are other funds, and what's the unfunded amount if we just look at Measure MM, and then what are the other funds we have that we could use, and that would then cut into that unfunded amount so that we can see what's truly unfunded across the district.
The number 5.4 would be exercise. That's not that 5.
Yeah, so that's where we're starting at. And then again, some of these other funds could have come in and filled that 5.4 very easily. And then what we'll see is, in 2 slides, is a new unfunded amount. And then we'll talk about what are the other funds that could build into that unfunded. And we laid it out this way because, as you know, we have multiple funds. And so trying to make it clear, where does Measure MM come to? What are the other funds we can use? And then what's the true number that we project right now as the unfunded amount for the overall facilities program? We talked about reported impacts in 2020. At this point, the current impacts, really, the biggest impact is the litigation against the Del Mar Heights school rebuild and the delay. That project was initially set to be completed by 2021. It will be completed in 2024, about 3 years behind schedule. You'll see when we look at the next slide that the budget has gone up by approximately $20 million. We've spent much of it due to escalation and the time frame, and we went through a period of time where escalation was at the highest we've seen in the last 20 years, and it's a multi-year that compounds on itself. So this dramatically higher escalation, when you have a project and it delays other projects, then impacts projects across the district. So the next couple of slides, I'm happy to answer. Please jump in. We're happy to answer questions as we go
Just
through.
to clarify, $20 million was the cost of the lawsuit to the escalation, the cost of the project.
Yes, and we can see here the changes in budgets that, and this, where Tiana Martin can jump in, and she does a lot of our work with the budget and be able to talk about the funds on the next slide as well, related to it.
So that number at the bottom right, 54 million, is that what slide 18 is? The percentage cost for those items on slide 18?
Yes, it's all of the unfunded. So if you look at the Ocean Air, Sycamore Ridge, Torrey Hills, part of stage 20.
Okay, so that's this, these items here,
Right.
54,735,000 projected cost.
I'll let Tiana speak to that.
Yes, so as we saw in a couple of the previous slides, the blue here was our original budget that was presented in 2020, and then the difference that we're looking at now is highlighted in the yellow. So for those unfunded projects, those three that were mentioned previously, so Sage Canyon, Torrey Hills, Sycamore Ridge, and Ocean Air, that 54.7 million is those particular projects.
If I recall, there were certain situations within the litigation that allowed us the opportunity to get attorney's fees or costs back. Where we sent off statutory offers, things of that nature, and we appealed, or they appealed. Has there been any money coming back to us as a result of prevailing litigation?
We have.
I don't think we can get money, attorney's fees because we're identity, but I think we set it up in certain ways to get these.
There's some filing fees and some things like that that we've put in for.
Expert fees, I think are entitled to that as well. So I don't want to overlook an opportunity, maybe we should talk to the council.
Yeah.
And she's doing,
We're working on those fees and the $60,000 bond that, for the injunction that we have a right to. So we are in the process of trying to bring those back to the district as well.
Okay, I just don't want to overlook that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So if I understand correctly, because of the litigation, we're now spending $20 million more than we anticipated. Separate from that, the cost, the actual litigation costs for attorney's fees, is that covered in this capital budget, or is that a separate line item in our operating budget?
Attorney fees are included in Measure MM. Yes. And in looking further at the next slide here, I'm sorry, the same here. So for Measure MM, these are only Fund 21 monies that are outlined here. And as Chris mentioned earlier, there are other funds that we anticipated being able to supplement there when we originally had the 5.3 million in 2020. So if we look to the next slide, we have the following funds and their ending fund balance as we presented to the board last week during unaudited actual. So Fund 14 is our deferred maintenance fund with ending fund balance of 2.2 million, and then also Fund 25 are our CFDs with the 1.3 and 6.3 million in our Fund 40 special reserve, and 15.8 million, I'm sorry, these are the CFDs here. So Fund 25 are capital facilities developer fees that we collect, for a total of the 25.7 million. In addition to that, we have an anticipated revenue of 8.5 million for our CFDs through 2030. So both of those together gives us the 34.3 million to offset or consider offset that deficit that we saw in the previous slide of 51.7 million for the unfunded projects.
Does that satisfy?
Would be the 20 million.
Well, if I'm not serious, it's not more than how that might like.
I'd like to just point out quickly too, of these funds, only certain funds can be used on district offices. We don't spend any of our bond funds on district offices. As we've shared, and we have a slide where we'll talk about Delmar Hills. But for things like our district office, our MOMF offices, we have specific funds such as Fund 40, which has monies that were in there from the sale of the old district offices. So we don't use Measure MM monies on any of our district offices. We're using them on our school sites.
Question. The Pacific Highlands Ranch School, the budget was only for roughly $23 million. I know the project costs more than that. Can you explain for the additional money?
So the remainder so we have the CFDs that we're looking at here. There's some revenue remaining, but there's also the excess special taxes that we collect and we're able to use towards facilities. As you remember, we sold CFD bonds that generated approximately $39 million and then use some of the other excess special taxes in that area to help fund Pacific Sky School. So Pacific Sky was funded actually more from Mello-Roos money from that area than from the bond, but the bond gave it the remainder that was needed to be able to build the school.
I think that's the initial projected cost. I missed a different question.
But the other question I did have was, so the CFD money, does that still go towards the Pacific Sky, or goes budget for other things, or the CFD that's left over here in the fund for the time?
So 99.1, that CFD, it can be used for Sycamore Ridge or Pacific Sky. So it could be used towards Sycamore Ridge. So yes, some of these have specific use areas. And rather than get into those, we thought it would be easier to look at it as big buckets, so it was easier to look at it as a big picture. But yes, if we use, or 95.1 is specific to Torrey Hills, Ocean Air areas, so we would have to then break this out to use it in specific areas. Another thing to point out, deferred maintenance, we have been saving that, and the goal had always been to save that to the end of the bond, to be able to use it as a true deferred maintenance program. So we are putting in, this is all the funds we could use. Fund 40 has often been something where we try to save a little bit because there may be a need for a non-school site. All that being said, when we have less money than we need for the need, then we look at what are all the funds we could use towards it, and then consider those options.
The money that came back for Pacific Sky was like $2 million. Is that been accounted for?
Yes.
Is that back in?
Well, so rather than coming back, it was a reduction in encumbrances.
Okay.
Somewhere here, do you explain what is involved in the modernization of schools that are remaining, both unfunded and hasn't yet been funded on C or D? So, and then have you thought about the relative priority between how important, what are modernizations and how important are they? What's the time frame as far as urgency in schools? Is that part of this analysis?
We have not broken it down to what is in the modernizations. We have a common modernization that we're doing across the district, and so making sure our classrooms are modernized, so we have an equitable educational program in all of our schools, and then making sure that based on the age of the school, the HVAC systems and moving systems that are needed to be improved are improved. So those were built into the kind of maintenance side of the modernization funds that we did when we did our facilities master planning a number of years ago.
Oh, the same program is rolling through each school.
Right. So I don't think, I don't know that I could prioritize. I think that we've looked at trying to do a modernization effort that will make sure that every school site ends with the same impact as best we can across the district.
I thought the next priority was Del Mar Hills.
So priority, I guess we are prioritizing them by age. So Del Mar Hills is the next school we're doing. But if I misunderstood the question.
No,
Yeah.
it's after Del Mar Hills. It's things that are after Del Mar Hills.
And then prioritizing, so we haven't prioritized in that Ocean Air is less important than Sycamore Ridge. It's that Ocean Air is newer than Sycamore Ridge, and therefore it doesn't have a need quite as early. We also look at the fact that at 25 years of age, a school does qualify for some state facility modernization funding. It's not a lot in our district. I mean, it's in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars to a low million, so it's not going to pay for it, but we try to aim for doing that modernization around the time of 25 years so that we can get all the funding we can get out of it. So we look at Ashley Falls was built in '98. We wouldn't want to do that before this year. Sage Canyon's 2001. We wouldn't want to start that until 2026. We're also looking at the timing of it so we can maximize the funding and the revenue that we can get.
One of the thoughts I had in this discussion is when I look at the modernization, the Del Mar Hills is already in flight and it's a high priority. And then I take a look at the other ones, some are in series, some are unfunded. If we were to go back and say 54 million is unfunded, the best we can do is find 20 million somewhere. Is there any way to spread, and I'm giving the answer now, and I'm wondering, will there be a way to spread the shortfall across some of the other modernizations? So by way of example, we've already are contemplating Ashley Falls as Series D money and Stage Canyon. And do we need to trim that budget by like 5% for one, 10% for the other, and then other percents for the other plans to sort of make the money go farther? If we can't find enough money to make up the income.
We have this 34, so we have that. And we are so short.
Just one thing I think, Christian, again, put it up to 34, is that some of it is the deferred maintenance. The idea was that we've been saving money all along the way during this bond program so that you don't have to rush right out with another bond as soon as it expires. The idea was to start planning and saving like any household would do so that you can cover future anticipated these legacy things like your roofing groups. So we may not want to spend the whole 34.
But I think these are the anticipated needs, these are the deferred maintenance students that our district has.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know all the specifics of what every project is.
It is, I mean, this is, we could go either direction. So I think that's where we're trying to give, here's all the information, all of the options we have. And one route would be, I mean, there are parts of this are sort of somewhat in the deferred maintenance realm, and you could certainly use those funds if we decide to go that route. But I also just want to paint the whole picture and make sure the board understands where that money is coming from.
With regard to Fund 25, do we anticipate any other developments being built that we would acquire for developer fee?
There will be small developments. You know, this is also if you, you know, add an ADU. There are pieces that come in. I can't remember. We have to look at the unaudited actuals, but you know, it's something we're not getting millions of dollars a year. So you get a couple $100,000. It's not a big. We're built out. So the big stuff, and honestly, the big money in there wasn't coming from the developer fees because we had the CFD. So CFD actually is a way to not do developer fees. That's when they entered into those mitigation agreements in the late 90s. Those took that space. North City West and then 99 one, 95 one. And then there still is, as you know, Doug, some money from North City West that we likely will get. But I think the remainder is somewhere around $1 million. So it's, I mean, that's something that will probably come in, but it's not, we don't have big chunks of money. I'll also say the CFD revenue, there will be money after 2030. And so we bring in, for a period of time, $1 million, $1.2 million a year. So there's some money that comes in, and so that is some revenue we will see over, we expect to estimate to see over a period of time from 2031 to 2045, 49 range. And it slows down towards the end because they have different end dates for the CFDs. So there is some money beyond that as well that is something we should also consider. We can give some more information about that.
And then looking deeper at the variances for each of the projects here, we have the Del Mar High School rebuild project variance of about $20 million, as previously discussed, due to litigation and associated delay, as well as the escalation. And for Pacific Sky School, the $2 million variance is also due to escalation as well as delay for the coastal process. And then for Del Mar Hills Academy modernization, a variance of the $5.6 million due to the escalation and also due to Del Mar Heights litigation, as well as increased scope for seismic analysis that was previously presented to the board. Other projects increased for $21.7 million, largely due to the litigation of Del Mar Heights as well as overall escalation.
Give me some examples there of where Del Mar based litigation, separate from escalation, if that's possible, impact a specific project.
It's the escalation and delay, that's it. So by delaying and pushing us out so that things are happening 2 to 3 years later, you escalate it by that percentage.
Any other projects, can you give me examples of those other projects that were impacted, not Del Mar specifically, but.
So then all of the other projects, just by, there's a combination. So part of it is delay, and part of it is just escalation. So even if it weren't delayed and it was supposed to happen in 2026, there would have been escalation that was more than we could have accounted for. There wasn't, there's nobody who had a crystal ball that was saying we're gonna have 8% and then 10%, 12% over the 3-year period that we had was just something that people couldn't project. So if you look across California, you have people who have bond programs that the budgets have been shot in a lot of cases because construction is costing more. So it's a combination of delay, and some of it is just escalation because it's far enough out in the bond program. So it's any of those. Say Torrey Hills.
So, Torrey Hills project might be put on hold because of Del Mar Heights litigation.
Well, everything may have taken a little bit longer, and so that's why we don't have it just as due to the litigation, because it's also just escalation. If we had been at the same, if we hadn't had it and we had been able to finish Del Mar Heights, we still would have had projects cost more than we would have expected because of the environment, the construction environment there.
I guess the argument is, could you have done something else during the time that Del Mar Heights was being delayed? Could you have started on something else? And I think that's what
Things could have happened more quickly, so it would have maybe reduced the impact to those out projects because it wouldn't have taken as long to get to some of them. Del Mar Hills would probably be completed by now. We'd be further along with Carmel Del Mar, so there'd be less impact to the escalation, but there still would be some impact. So it's hard to say that it's just that it was delayed by Del Mar Heights because the escalation would have impacted those projects that were happening further down the line.
And we also had to use other facilities for the Del Mar Heights campus during that time period. So we really didn't have options to do a lot of work at other
Right, it's not as
campuses.
simple to say, oh, you should start at Del Mar Hills or Del Mar Heights is what we had to do there.
Right.
Yeah, that's the question, because that the argument the Save the Field folks or whoever will argue is that, well, why did you do something to do with the other projects? Well, this is what the answer is that it could impact on them, because there are needs that the other facilities that they use are.
And there's also staff capacity, that staff can only expand our staff to do other projects at the time they are tied up with limitations. Yep.
Yeah, and it's a terrible document that
Yeah.
costs us upwards of $20 million. It's not just $20 million, that's specific to Del Mar Heights. It was a $20 million increase, but then we have additional increases on our other projects, which are also related to litigation, which is something that we talked about too. I mean, we said that it was going to be a domino effect that happens to every single project down there, and they're going to have problems because the ones at the end are not going to get the same amount of money anymore because of this litigation. We already talked about that.
And to your point, we couldn't have moved projects at the end to the beginning because of the manner by which things were being done.
So it's tragic. It's a real shame that it's.
So moving on, some of the things that we look at in working through an effective bond program, we are updating projections now. We have consultant input. We have a company that we work with that does our bond accounting software and helps us with looking at doing good estimates and looking forward. We've prided ourselves and we work with community engagement throughout the process, from our facilities master plan development to our citizens oversight committee, the design process of each of our schools, the monthly board updates. We continue to get the highest score we can on the Taxpayers Association report card. There are two items that we just don't do with the resolution and another piece, but we get every other score right there. And we've twice gotten the Moody's AAA rating. So we continue to work to effectively manage the bond and do the best we can to move forward projects and work with the boards to get as much as we can done. And there are some things we just can't control, between litigation and escalation that we're unseen and uncontrolled. The one other thing that we need to bring back to the board, and this is one area where we have a recommendation for the board, and we're going to ask for direction, is with the next steps for Del Mar Hills Academy. Because there is not a plan to stop moving forward with Del Mar Hills Academy, and we are looking to move forward with construction starting next summer. As we've shared, there are two options. One is to have a phased on-site, where we keep students on-site, we do construction on-site. This would take approximately 2 years and would cost about $4 to $5 million more than it would to move students off-site. We've gotten updated construction cost estimates. Now, these are estimates from 50% construction documents. That means that they are, the detail is halfway to the full construction documents, but it's enough to be able to do a decent estimate. I'll be honest, those always have contingencies in there because there's a little bit of unknown. So we're doing estimates, we're working with our contractor who has industry knowledge and bids projects on a regular basis, and working with our architects to get these numbers so that we can bring them to the board. The offsite option, we included money for busing and temporary classrooms, knowing that moving students offsite would likely mean going to a site or two, very likely 2 sites, much like we've done with Del Mar Heights, and there is a chance that we would need temporary classrooms to do that, as we did with Del Mar Heights relocation. We still need to work through that. We have our enrollment in reorder classes this year, and we need to project to next year. So a next step, I would recommend offsite. I think that we are, at this point, we've shared that we are upside down the bonds to a tune of at least $20 million. I think that this is also a site where doing construction with students on site, there is one entry point, and it goes down a hill and gets you onto this site. There are some other schools in our district where you have 2 entry points. You can easily segregate things. You can have a laydown area where construction can work, and it makes it a much easier process to do it while we have students on site. And so I think between the cost savings and the ease of being able to get the project done would make an offsite the district recommendation to move forward with. That being said,
So I'm leaning towards the district recommendation as well. I'm curious if it would stay on site, would a certain section of students be, and where would they go?
so we would have to cordon off a portion of the site, and you would use the portables we have on there, and so we would have, say, half the school that we can't use. We have to find a way to then mark off that portion of the school so that you block off construction from students. Being that it's one single school that kind of wraps around, it would make it a little bit harder because you're literally breaking up the school, because we still would need some classrooms and some administration space. And then likely there would be downtime too, because they get as much as they could get done, and then the school year would still have some time left, and we'd sort of be at a standstill, and then they would have to move students and move all those classes into some of the newly modernized and some other portables, and ship things around and work on it the next year and do things over the summer. And so it just will be a complex project, much more complex. And we could look at tents and other things to get some space outside.
It sounds messy.
It is, and it is, especially when you have a single building and you have a one point of entry. And those 2 pieces also just make it is harder. If you were at Ashley Falls or Sage Canyon, you have 2 points of entry. You can segregate some things. It would be easier, and you have buildings where you can do this building now and another. And so at Del Mar Hills,
If you go over Del Mar Heights in the morning, it's full of all the construction cars and
yeah.
getting in and out with students too. That
Yeah.
would be a lot.
So what do you mean the difficult? Where is it difficult?
Because you have to bring in, then there's going to be deliveries. There's going to be
And people are trying.
yeah, you have a concrete pour that's coming in, and they have to drive down the hill, but we also have to do drop off and pick up and coordinate the schedules. And so you could have 2 points of entry. It's more doable.
There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, a lot of overlap.
What's the start date? Would they both start at the same time?
We would anticipate, yeah, our goal is to start at the beginning of this, at the end of the school year,
So you would start right at,
June 24th. We are on track to get those construction documents finished and to PSA so that we can get approval, so we can bid it out in the spring, so that we can start work in.
Should students be, all students be able to come back onto campus, so the 24, 25
So in
school year?
August of 25, because 24, 25 would be the off, and then 25, 26, we would anticipate starting with students back on campus.
Even though that's 14 months, we can still have.
14 really gives us, because we have June and July go on both ends. You get June, July, and 1 summer. You get 2 summers and the school year, so you get this extra 2 months of work.
Sorry, so the people, so this one, there's offsite, the people start, you're gonna start voting, thinking, June 24, to be able to get back on campus,
August of 25.
August of 25. Okay. And what is the other schedule for the onsite report?
June 24 through August of 26. So it would be something. Yeah, 22 months gives us, it may be done in that spring. And then, but I would still wonder if something needed to happen over the summer. So the contractor said 22 months, but I would wonder if we still need to do something this spring, the summer of that second.
It's kind of hard in the middle of the year.
I can just see, just with that, you end up at a point where we have to stop and we need to do something that's impactful, and so we have to do that over the summer, so
And I was just thinking through the construction ways a little bit longer than the side. So the offsite will start June 2024 and working up to August 2025. That's really tight. So if you're over a month or two, you're already into the school year. And so just have to anticipate whatever fun, busing, temporary classrooms you have to continue for a couple months.
Track record is pretty good.
It is, but you bring up a good point, Alan, and so that's something that we'd be monitoring and looking at. Oftentimes, the end of construction means that some of the big things are done, and we're looking at, what are the little things? So, we'd be trying to look at the phasing of it. If you have to finish something interior-wise, make sure it's a classroom first, and then we finish the STEAM classroom. So we would also then look at scope and timing and make sure that we're finishing those classrooms in the front office first, and maybe the admin, the STEAM classrooms last. And so there'd be some of that conversation. And we'd be, once you start construction, and we're at Del Mar Heights every week, and so we're having conversations. We have people popping in even more often. So those conversations are part of the whole process as we get down the road.
Has there been any conversations with the community over there about what they want?
There haven't yet. So we wanted to bring this to the board. The board says we should move with offset. There will be conversations with that community, and so we needed to know what should those conversations be. If we are moving forward with it being offset, then the conversations are around, just like we had with the Del Mar Heights community. We're looking at where those offsite locations will be. We'll talk about how we can make sure that it's a smooth transition. We'll talk about keeping the community with 2 satellite campuses. We'll talk about what busing might look like. And so we would go and engage the community with, get questions and make sure we're able to answer them. But
That's not really a conversation. I mean, that's like, we're telling you what we're gonna do, and this is how we're gonna do it. I'm talking about a conversation, whether you want to be offsite or onsite.
And if the board does not give direction to move forward with offsite and wants us to get input and come back with the communities, we can do that too. But it felt like we were putting the cart before the horse if we shared this information. The board said to us, you know what, we really think that because of the cost difference, we should move forward with offsite. I didn't want to ask for community input prior to having an idea of which direction.
I'm facing, my concern on some of the public statements tonight. I mean, we've been dealing with for a decade, the thought that the school's gonna be closed. And we've never had a conversation about that since I've been around. But they're still thinking that. And so it seems to me there's some sort of communication detach. And I don't wanna, play into that any further. I understand, saving the money is a huge benefit for the offsite concept. But it sounds to me like they're in that community, not really hearing what we're saying.
Well, both would start in 2024, so I'm confused about where that would come from, because the project will start in 2024, that's the plan. So either it's onsite or offsite.
I'm just basing it on what was said tonight, and they were concerned that the schools would be closed and office was going to be closed. I've heard that since 2010. I don't know where that comes from.
I don't either, because the construction's starting in 2024.
I understand that.
So it really is wrong, what Chris is saying. It's a very large cost difference, and we need to know whether the board approves that. If the board approves the $5 million to go toward keeping the children on site and to have that conversation, then that is something we'll move ahead with and have that conversation. If the board does not approve the $5 million tonight to be able to go toward that, then that's a very different conversation. But we need to be authentic and.
What I would say is that our responsibility is not only to those that don't want to go, but there's also to the rest of the district as well. And we definitely should engage in conversations with them, but in terms of the decision-making process, it's not necessarily up for a vote for the folks at Del Mar Hills necessarily to say, like, I want this or I don't want this. It's a matter of there's literally billions of dollars that are
I understand all of that.
that affect the rest of the district.
We've had this conversation in prior meetings, and it's a little discouraging that we're still having a conversation.
I thought we made a recommendation in May at that meeting to go with.
No, there's been no.
It was in
recommendation.
to do one or the other, was that we were gonna move forward with the project and increase, knowing we would have to increase the budget, so we
I would
continue
have
to.
hoped during that period of time that we would have spoken with the community about their deal.
We intentionally did not do that because we have to know, is this $5 million?
So again, that's what I'm suggesting, is like, it is not a, I don't think it's the best idea to say, it's not a vote necessarily for them. So like, come up to Del Mar Hill and be like, these are your two options. I mean, that's gonna put us all in a very poor position, because the idea is that the board determines what is best for the resources of this district. And where do we spend those resources?
Input from.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm not suggesting you give them a
But that's-
choice. I'm saying
but
that
if
you
you ask
explain
them-
to them what's happening and the reasons for it. And they'll understand that. But it sounds like people still think we're gonna close the school. And to me, my jaw dropped.
So why I want to think about the perceptions of the families is for this reason. To me, if I'm considering this recommendation, this is just my thought process. There are three major considerations. One is the money, one is less expensive, maybe a limited budget, that's important. Second is, there is an impact on the offsite, and we've heard from families about having to keep us, recently, and you hear that, and it's an impact. Now you have to weigh it, it may not be as important as the money piece, but I want to weigh it. And the third one, which is the reason I asked about the timing, is one has more risk, timing risk, that we would try to do it in 14 months, and something happens, there may be more risk in finishing on time versus the 22-month one. Now, if I were to weight my three factors, my third one I'd weight really small, and I'd weight the money piece really large, but I would want to weight what we think the impact would be on the communities. Now, whether we have to do the survey and ask the question may not be necessary. We may, as a group, be able to, understand how important that is and say, well, it's important. The cost savings is really outweighs that because it benefits everybody. Whatever, the thought process would be, that's how I think about it. So I value thinking about how it impacts the families. I don't know that we have to do a survey, but I want to make sure that everybody knows, in that community, that we are thinking about it and considering that impact as we make a decision of why it might be more important to save money.
And also because there's such massive construction going on while students are trying to learn. And their safety, their health and well-being, I feel like it's going to be impacted by having construction there. For 22 months, 2 years of their schooling, their formative education years. So.
Yeah, I think the disruption goes both ways.
Right.
And they're absolutely, I weigh the same exact fact.
But I think this
Yeah.
discussion is
Exactly.
which is exactly what we should be doing.
Erica, do you have a point?
Yeah, and that's helpful. Catherine's a Del Mar Hill's parent, and she's given her opinion on what makes the most sense as far as impacts to campus. But I think when we think about what we've been very committed to community outreach and what the exact format of it is, we can talk about, who we're talking to. It's the Del Mar Hills community, of course, and it's also all the other schools that would be impacted by the numbers that we've looked at, the 34 million shortfall doesn't include the extra $5 million that this would cost if we did it all, if we did it in a phased manner. So that becomes a $40 million shortfall, if my number's right. So that's an impact on all the other campuses. So then from a community perspective, how do people feel about, all those modernizations being impacted by additional expenditures at Del Mar Hills Academy? And finally, there's the impact on the receiving sites of the schools that will have to take the kids that are displaced for that year, 14 months, or whatever the time period is. So those are all community issues that aren't just about one school, but I mean, regardless, we want to educate, inform, and make sure that all this information is available as far as what are the impacts of the decision points.
Yeah, that's exactly what my opinion is. Erica, tomorrow, other schools that to be impacted. So like we can ask Sage Canyon, like, you know, if we spend 5 million there, and we have difficulty now meeting their needs, potentially they're underfunded. You know, we go to each individual school and talk about there, how exactly do we, you know, communicate with the public about this. So it's not just simply one school, but it is a number of schools, like Eric mentioned. Like there are schools that you have to be busing into.
I think we could look at like things that we could cut in Delmar Heights, or things that we could cut in Pacific Sky. The community is not consulted on in any way. You know, this is an opportunity to have 2 different options, and the community can decide on those options, in my opinion.
Which part of the community?
The Delmar Heights community, whose students are going to be impacted by this the most, the greatest.
But that's kind of my point is that like, other people are also impacted by it, like people
Oh,
that
sure,
are getting.
sure, and the whole entire district was impacted by Pacific Sky being built in Delmar Heights. And we weren't consulted about a variety of things. You know, that school at Pacific Sky is, you know, what voted the best school in the nation or the best school in the state. And then you have Delmar Hills, which is, you know, not that. So I just think that it's important.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be Pacific Sky, but it's a great school. My kids love it.
Just saying, yeah.
Okay. So I just think, yeah, I mean, we let the community decide, and, or at least we get their input on this. We can make the ultimate decision, but I think they can, you know, intelligent, bright community members can look at these numbers as well, and, you know, we can give the information as presented to us tonight.
How does that affect things if there's at least a question posed?
Or just that, how about we just present it and allow for input, and then we make our decision, you know, like, I mean, we're presenting it here tonight. Maybe someone will write about it in the paper, I don't know. But I think it's important for the community to be given this information on a large scale, so that they can see for themselves how these 2 options will, you know, potentially impact
Right.
the district.
And I agree with Natalie. I mean, I'm kind of weighting these factors. The money factor is big.
Yeah, it's
The money
huge.
factor
Sure.
affects more people down the road. But I would like to know what the thought process is. But I'm hearing the thought process, if we think we're gonna close the school, and that's something we're going to do.
So when would you want us to vote on this, at the next board meeting?
But we would, if the board is not prepared to give direction, then I need direction on, are we moving forward with offsite? Is there some sort of input that the board would like us to see gathered? And we will either gather it or move forward with one of these options. And
Well, can we put it on the agenda for the next board meeting? Which isn't too far. That we're gonna have a conversation and make a determination. If anybody has input, then that's the time to present the input at the public forum. I mean, if we're running against the timeline.
Well,
Like
what
going
did you
into
say,
timeline.
the deadline for, you want to submit the DSA documents by what date?
They're giving the same purpose, they're already getting rid of it.
yeah, there'll be some. I mean, there might be some minor tweaks, but it's not going to cause a major issue
What
for
was
us.
that date?
Second,
When do you want to submit documents?
around the end of the calendar year, or beginning of
December?
December,
There's
January.
time.
I'd like to hear what their thought process is.
So I'm a little bit confused with wouldn't that ultimately kind of change the factors that we're thinking in terms of if, because I
can't tell you what it's gonna do or what the time do.
I think it's just important to talk to our, just like we did for Pacific Sky and Delmar Heights, we had many evenings of engagement with the community. All our schools deserve that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just saying, like, in terms of making this calculation, making this decision as to what options you take, one or the other, the 2 things or the 3 things I'm very similar to Alan because I think about, like, is it cost, expediency, and disruption. So in terms of cost, clearly there's a winner. I mean, clearly there's one option that's better than the other. Expediency, there's clearly one that's better than the other. Disruption, I can hear, you know, there can be arguments that are made on both ways, and that's something that the public could weigh in on, and to tell me that it would be disruptive for me to either be on campus, like you said, while there's buildings being constructed, or it'd be disruptive to me to have to send my kids elsewhere and have to bus them or whatnot. But do those necessarily trump the other two? And could you make that decision without that, hearing that third piece?
Well, I guess the question is, why would you without hearing?
I think that's what we discussed in the May meeting as well, giving and getting community input.
I mean, we could do things in a closed room and make decisions like that, but I don't think that's what we're about.
No, I'm saying that, but we get your input. What if your input is not, like, let's say, for instance, I lean towards this do it offsite. And if we got the input from them and said, like, hey, by never in a million years would we want to do offsite. We only want to do onsite. Then are we setting ourselves up for failure in the sense that, because I'm going to
You just
bullshit
have to
you.
take that chance. Basically, I hear everybody here saying that the numbers all point to the one, the 14-month option, the less expensive option. I hear the one, the close parent at the table saying she thinks that also makes sense, most likely from the perspective of the kids and the students. And so we have kind of like a front runner, shall we say, as far as what we expect, where we expect this to go. But what if there's something that we haven't thought about, and so there's no harm in going out, this is not locked and loaded until the end of the year, so we have time to get input from the community and to be thoughtful.
So, for me, back to the suggestion, is what would it look like if we put this on the agenda for the next board meeting? I personally wouldn't wait for the public comment. I will do my job as I see to go in and ask some parents at different sites and say, I'm going to be asked on the next board meeting to decide between these. And I'll ask for at different school sites because I have contacts there. Tell me what you think, what's your process of thinking about this? And it's probably likely that my working hypothesis is the offsite, unless someone comes and tells me something I haven't thought about. And I don't need to wait for the public comment to form an opinion. And I'll be ready to do my job at that meeting to vote what I think is best.
Bring a picture of a student next to a jackhammer.
But you also should have to do like an individual outreach to ad hoc people around the district, and there can be a public forum where we can all hear the same information from whoever wants to talk, and that's the responsibility of the district to figure out. So it's complicated to figure out, should we do a public meeting, should we do a workshop? I don't have the perfect answer, so we have to think through what would be the most optimal way to get that input, that we don't have to make that decision right now. It's not to think about it, think what's the best way to do it. But to me, it's better as a collective than just as all kind of one-off conversations.
But I would like to vote on this one, so I would like personally to vote on it in the next board meeting.
So if we don't vote on the next board meeting, but I like the idea of doing it, would we need to do at least the next one? When do you need us to just be decisive and vote and give you the direction?
Within the next two board meetings, but hearing what the board is saying, we can discuss how we can gather some more input and aim to bring it to you at the October board meeting. And should there be a just timing need based on process, then we could get the November board meeting, which isn't very far into it.
But as far as submitting the documents to DSA, either
We'll still submit the same basic documents, and if there are tweaks that need to be made because it's sort of phasing versus not phasing, then we'll work with the team to make that happen.
The one thing again I would reiterate is that unfortunately it's not just a Delmar Hills issue. If $5 million affects Ocean Air getting any kind of modernization whatsoever, how do you include them in the conversation? How do you include civil regulatory bills, the ones that are at the bottom of this? How do they get to be incorporated in the conversation? So it's absolutely we'll talk to
No, but
Delmar Hills.
I think that's what we're saying, right? I think that at least what I'm hearing is that the community input that we're seeking is not just from one school.
That's what I'm saying.
District-wide community input on the impacts and implications of this
Yeah,
change. So it would definitely come to that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm happy either approach. I'm happy to do it ad hoc, but if there's benefit of it not being ad hoc, where we can all do the same thing at the same time, might be more efficient, but I would defer to the staff as to, what's the right type of venue without turning it into people with, big signs,
Yeah. No, I definitely think, based on everything that you're saying, is to have various ways to reach out to the community, have meetings, allow them to come and hear the information, because absent of the context and the information, they don't, I mean, it's easy to jump to one or the other, and it's not fair to the community to not have all of the information like we're talking about right now. So I think that's the better way to go about it, is for us to make sure that the community has the information, all the same information. We can provide multiple ways to allow for the community to be engaged.
Specifically to Del Mar Hills families, this might be the time to ask them about if we chose the offsite option, what sites students would be relocated to during this time, and get their input on that.
We may or may not have many choices, they're just like,
Or give them the
it may
choices,
be,
give them the options.
these are, this is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Say these are the potential
Yeah.
schools that your children will be going to, your grade divisions,
Yeah.
details.
Well, the good news is we have experience with busing kids to other schools already, so that's not going to be something we're not familiar with.
I will say as a parent of a child that has been lost for like at least 3 years, it seems like, I don't know how long it's been, it's very seamless, and it's been a really good experience. So as far as the experience of the kids and the families, I'm not sure it makes even a difference once they land that. On the other end, they have a great time. They do. Bus drivers can be so much.
With a nice and charred.
I think that I've noticed, especially this year, there's been a lot of incorporation between grades and both kids.
Great, this is good input, and again, we didn't want to go out and get input before sharing with the board, so this helps us to guide that and we'll execute that.
It sounds like it's something that we can bring a similar discussion
Yep.
to the community and one of the future board meetings in the near future for further discussion.
All right, so then we'll move into some of the unforeseens and potential needs. And the biggest one that we're going to bring up is the satellite kitchen. So when we started the bond program, there was no universal meals. We were serving 15–18% of our students' meals. We were having it bussed in from another outside source. With the central kitchen, we're now able to produce fresh food, and salads, and scratch cooked options, but we have to pre-package all meals. And as we're opening Pacific Sky, and we'll be opening Del Mar Heights, we have satellite kitchens that allow us to potentially have salad bars and have fresher options. But when we look at schools that don't have those, I think it was an oversight 15–20 years ago when those schools were built to not build something like that in there. And so we are bringing this to the board because we are at a time where we're doing modernizations, and it would be an oversight that somebody would speak about our administration if we had not brought this up 15 or 20 years from now. And we didn't bring up the need to be able to have satellite kitchens so we can have those meals and salad bars and fresh foods and not have to literally wrap an apple so that you can send it out, because we don't have 3-compartment sinks and the ability to do it. So I recognize that we've just brought to you that we have an upside down bond, and I'm telling you that there's another need. But there are unforeseens. And I'm going to share a couple others that we don't need to address right now, but it just illustrates the fact that 5 years from now, there'll be something else that comes up. And so it is just the nature of facilities. But this is something that we do recommend we need to look at how we could add this in. And we looked at it, and we first started up, and we have the serveries that allow us to serve the meals and run the program that we have now, but it doesn't have 3-compartment sink, the ability to do the warming pieces that would allow us to do a true satellite kitchen. So,
Do you know what the cost might be?
That's always the question.
that's the great, and we are going to do a little bit more investigation. We know that at the cost of each school site, we don't have a space. We'd either be reconfiguring a space or adding some space, and so the cost would likely be $1 million, $1.5 million at a site. But we'll need to do a little bit more information. So it's a notable cost at every school site, and we will do a little bit more estimating on what it would be. But then there's a decent amount of work to find a location to kind of do some information on building that out. And so we wanted to bring this to the board with our recommendation. And if it is a non-starter, because we are at the point we are with the bond, then it really isn't worth going through a work and bringing people in to identify locations and get more detail on that cost. I can tell you in general, that would be over $1 million at each site.
Where would you kind of slot this in? Would it be something you're doing this in your future, which then affects like the one type of
It could go one of two ways. It could be something that you try to build into the modernizations, but then we have to figure out how we would fund it. It could be something that you add as a separate piece there, but then you're obviously going into a school site after the fact to make it happen. But it is something that I think is a need that we're just seeing now, but we're going to see become more illustrated when you see what we can do at a school that already has one versus one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested. I don't think I can answer this question. First of all, I don't think it's a non-starter, personally. But I don't think I can answer this question without better understanding what really is the need for salad bars in elementary schools. That's kind of going to wrap an apple, but like, what does it really amount to as far as the impact at a school site? You know, what % of kids are actually going to benefit from this? You know, what is it, right? So I think that we're just kind of like, you know the answer to that, but I don't know the answer to that, I don't know the answer to that. So once we have that information, it'll be easier to decide if it's worth $1 million to school site.
Well, we've been planning to do a CNS Universal Meals presentation to the board, and so that's something we can wrap into that and have Jamie Phillips, somebody who can speak better to it than I, be able to speak. And he has worked in multiple districts and will be able to bring some information and some guidance and information to the board. So we can bring that certainly to the board, even at this next board meeting.
And it seems the term kitchen is somewhat definitional, I guess. I mean, is it a one thing in a hot plate? Is it a sink in a refrigerator? What are we calling a kitchen? And what is, maybe he can give us some insight as to what is the minimum requirement and what is, you know, our
Yeah, we'll look at the minimum. The minimum is having 3 compartment sinks so that we can actually do the health code approved cleaning of things, having some cold storage and some warming spaces is sort of the minimum. And that would then require a certain amount of space. I mean, it's not a full classroom, but it's a certain amount of space that allows you to house those items. And we can certainly give you, Jamie can better illustrate that for us.
I'm definitely not, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm a big fan of seeing what other districts are doing and what's successful. So if there's an elementary school district that's similar to ours that pulled out a salad bar and no one used it, that's good information. If they tried something that is wildly successful and cost effective, let's learn from that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, at Solana Beach, when we visit their schools, they all have individual kitchens at their individual schools. So they have, you know, that, and that's something more that Jamie can share with us as well.
And literally every other school district in the county has these spaces. And so we can certainly, we actually have toured Encinitas, we've gone to Solana Beach and looked at some of their programs, and then Jamie will be able to, just with his experience in multiple districts, speak to it as well. So we'll bring more information to the board, but I wanted to, in the context of this, to share that this is something that we see as a need, and I don't have all the solutions for it, but we wanted to bring it to the board and start that conversation.
And let us know, if it's really the difference between wrapping an apple and spending $1 million per school.
It's not.
Okay.
That's an example of some of the over-the-top little pieces, but it's more than that, and we'll be able to, we'll bring some more detail for you. And I hear the, you know, what is the scale from a satellite kitchen, which you're thinking is basically the central kitchen again at every site, which is not what we're talking about, to something that is smaller. And we visited some of those in Encinitas and some other places to have an idea. In fact, we modeled our central kitchen off of Encinitas, and they have you know, some of these smaller satellites at each of the school sites. So yeah, we will bring some more information back to the board.
Thank you.
And then just by way of illustrating some of these potential needs, a couple of things that we don't need to worry about right now, but battery backup for solar installation. We built new schools before this came into play, but California Energy Code is updated, requiring solar and battery on new buildings. Vehicle charging is something that's coming down the line. There's a AB 579, which is about zero emission buses. That doesn't impact us, but if the state is mandating zero emission buses, it's probably not too far to consider that down the line. District fleets of any vehicles may be mandated to be zero emission at some point. So not things that we need to address right now, but it just is things that I see coming that just illustrates that, there were needs that just kind of come up that are kind of similar to this central kitchen, satellite kitchen idea.
If I can just add one other potential bullet for you just to think about, is security. So I'm an optimist and hope that all of our security measures that we have today are sufficient, and we'll keep getting updates from law enforcement to understand what threats are. But if there might be a need in the future, if the threat assessment changes, thinking about whether it's cameras or motion detectors or things that cost money that might be needed in the future. We may not need them now, we may need them never, hopefully, but to maybe think about if we have to look at those in the future, that we at least have some money if we want to move in that direction.
Are we on, do schools fall in a similar kind of category? Are you hearing like households do, is it like this too?
We still pay through SDG&E, and so depending on when you come online with solar, there are some, whether you're in NEM2 or whether you move into 3, and so as we move down the line, I also bring this up because there may be, as we are now reviewing NEM3, is there a need to consider battery and how that might be used with solar as we move into future projects. So that's a consideration. It's not something we are yet investigated, but it's something we're going to be looking into and how that.
But it's a sense of it basically for
there's similar
residential
areas.
and for schools. Okay. Yeah.
Just going back to the other potential needs, and maybe I'll address this later on, and I know you've spoken on it, but do we have the capacity to fully implement transitional kindergarten with enough bathrooms?
I will
Okay.
share a slide on that at the
here.
end that will give a capacity slide.
Great.
Yeah.
In terms of, sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
This shouldn't be like, well, I guess you'd have to, for a school, you'd have to have a lot of veterans. So it would be probably a significant cost, and would it be a pretty large cost, you think, or like?
You'd have a fairly large cost to do a battery backup system for the solar system that we put on a school. I mean, you're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for the system, and they're pretty large. I mean, so you need a little, an enclosure kind of space that you put these batteries in, because it's not just the Tesla on the wall. I mean, it's a, substantial.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't know, maybe in the future batteries might be a little cheaper.
Well, that's part of it too. I mean, we monitor too, what's the cost, what's the viability, that things are coming down and they are being longer lasting, what's the lifespan. When we first looked at it 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, some of these weren't lasting 10 years and you were having this big investment. So there's that play into it as well.
I just haven't been going through all of this, so there's a lot of consideration.
There are.
But, technology is improving, and that's kind of one of the things that I keep telling us, that better technology is maybe something to think about in the medium-term range.
Definitely. And that's sort of why I put it up there, because it may be something that comes back to us in a couple of years.
Yeah.
We touched on most of this. I mean, the unforeseen conditions also. So we have some unforeseen needs, unforeseen potential needs, and we have unforeseen conditions that have impacted. And so we've talked about the general economic impact of the pandemic and then the resulting financial situation, cost escalations, and overall inflation that's impacted not just our facilities. We look through it this lens right here, but I mean, everybody else has seen it happen with gas or eggs or what have you. And then supply chain, which I couldn't think of the word because I just exited out of my brain with all the talk we had to have about it, but supply chain and procurement issues and delays have been a big part of what's played into some of those costs that go into escalations we've seen.
Just a question of litigation risk. So when we built a new structure, there was litigation risk. For any of these other modernization plans or anything else you have in the plan, is there any risk of someone not wanting us to move forward, or is the risk low because it's simply modernization?
There's always risk, but I would say the risk is lower because we are not changing the footprint of those schools. In many cases, when you look at a modernization, there is an exemption through GeeWah, and you can do a notice of exemption, and then you move through and you're able to move on. There's a statutory timeline of, I think, 30 days after you issue a notice of exemption, so then it sort of shortens the period, and then the risk is much less after you've gotten through that statutory timeline. So I would say it's much less. And we still will monitor and we'll go through the SQL process of analyzing and looking at, is there an exemption that applies? And if there is an exemption apply, we'll go through it. If they don't apply, then we look at, is there an impact? And if there isn't an impact, so we go through those kind of checklists and steps that you have with SQL. And with that, I will hand it over to Ryan for enrollment.
So, with board direction, gives an opportunity to go back and take a look at historically how we've been, what our numbers have looked like for our enrollment, and as well to do some of those projections as well. So we've had an opportunity to go back and work with data. So, looking back historically, back from 2013 all the way through 2020, leading up to the issuance of Measure MM and shortly thereafter, you can see our district-wide K-6 enrollment. We've been hovering pretty steadily in the low 400s, just a little, or 4,000s and mid 4,000s, down to about 4,160. And then more recently, as we've shared in recent board meetings, we're definitely noting that our district, and along with the rest of the state of California, is that we're experiencing declining enrollment. So we spoke about the fact that 2/3 of districts across the state of California are saying that they are experiencing declining enrollments. And it's a fact that there are far fewer kids of school age across the state of California right now than there used to be. So in 2021, 2022, that was the first time in the state of California that we've actually dipped below 6 million students of school age. And even looking back across the state over the last 4 years, we're also noting that we've declined by an additional 5.4% of school age students. So looking more locally, we know within our area, we know that we're a wonderful school district, we know folks want to be able to be here, but we also do know that it is a high cost of living. We know that it's high interest rates at this point in time. And as we're having conversations with families, we're hearing a lot of families we're talking about that are moving into this area. They like it. It's a very desirable area with great elementary schools, great secondary schools. And what's happening is that they're moving in and staying put. They're having their kids are working through the system, and then as a turn, and they're staying and not having new families continue to move in. Recently, I had a chance to listen to Dr. Selma Hepp, the chief economist from CoreLogic, and she was also sharing other information saying, within our area right now, home affordability are at the lowest levels in 40 years. And also saying for the average house payer, we also are knowing that the typical mortgage payment for the average house is at the highest levels that it's ever been. And as we're seeing is they're also reporting that, really, frankly, people are moving out of San Diego. At CoreLogic, they're really identifying the area of San Diego as a high out area for migration. And talking and saying that instead we're really seeing much more growth in many people moving to areas. They're moving to Florida, moving to Texas, moving to Arizona. And so we're definitely seeing an outflux of people from the state, and CoreLogic is reporting within our area.
So Ryan, why don't I just add that I was speaking with a very active real estate leader in the area who works with a lot of the homes here. His take is we're not seeing people leave our district to move out of state, where we may see that other parts in San Diego. What he attributed the issue that I was describing in enrollment to him was that as a family that might naturally decide to downsize and release that house for a new family with younger children, because of the interest rates, when you downsize, you're going to get a smaller house and be paying the same. And so people aren't releasing the homes and having the new families move in. So he believes for our district, it's more of the issue of that versus people moving out, for what it's worth. It's the same conclusion, but slightly different factors for Del Mar and Carmel Valley than for the rest of the city.
Sorry, question, right? And you might, I'm just a little, you haven't gotten to the next slide yet, but can you just give us the 21-22 and the 22-23 and 23-24 numbers for enrollment?
I don't have all of those with me. I do have, on the next slide, I'll be able to get to, and I can show you where our current numbers are.
Okay.
For right now, and I can speak to where there's the difference, because it's related to the percentages of students who were born who are showing up in our schools.
These numbers, do they include the preschool?
They do not.
Okay.
These are only K-6.
Okay.
So So really what we've done is we've then had a chance, and with the board's direction, then to work with Davis Demographic to go back and really conduct kind of, as you refer to it, as that sensitivity analysis, or that opportunity to take a look at, well, what would happen if we were to realize different percentages of students? And again, when we're looking at kindergarten, we're looking at students who were born 5 years ago. And so looking at folks that were born within our footprint, within our area, then going back and trying to project out how many of those students then show up within our schools 5 years later. Erica, we did check and tried to find out if there was any other metric, any other way of keeping track and find families once they're born, and can we find where they are before they show up in Davis, and that they don't have that short of going out and surveying folks and knocking on doors at that time. And so really what we did is, and what I'll share on the next few slides, are looking at 3 different scenarios. What would enrollment look like across the district if we were to continue the pattern that we saw this year? And again, we know that you were just saying is we're really seeing a very significant trend in the number of students who are showing up. We then are going to be looking at a bit more of that middle projection, what might it look like based on some of the most recent years, and then we'll also show you a higher projection if we look back at those historical averages from 2015. So this slide is showing what enrollment might be projected like if we were to continue the current capture rate, which was up.
Numbers accurate for 2020, 2021?
Yeah, that's catching me too, because that's, when you look at 2020, this says 2020 is.
So what, absolutely, thank you. And so what we did is when we tried working with Davis, he's had to go back and basically calculate these individually as opposed to within a system. And so on the real numbers, there also are numbers where they'll capture the number of students that maybe are outside of the district and coming in. So in 2020, 21, 2022, the true numbers are a little bit higher because Jacob wasn't able to go through and recalculate everything. What you'll see though is looking at 2023, those are our actual enrollments based on where we were on August 15th, 2023. So at that point, we were able to have enrollment of 3,640 students. And so within this projection, what we asked is to be able to do then was, what would it look like looking at birth rates? What would then happen with enrollment? So if we look over to the column for 2024, looking at the number of students that were born 5 years previous to 2024, if we were to continue that lower capture rate of about 59% of students coming, we would then see the students becoming, we would see 347.2 students. Then going.
So is that the percentage that we're, is it 59?
That's at the 59%. So this
Going
is
down 59 every year? Is that what we're doing?
correct. That's what this projection is showing. Is
The
looking at
capture
not
rate?
going down
Or
59
combine
every
the
year,
capture rate.
but it's looking at that capture rate, looking at the
Capture rate
percentage
of
of
59%.
correct.
Or
Okay.
birth rates.
Correct.
Sorry, I don't want to like belabor this, but I'm a little stuck on why we weren't able to get the accurate numbers, the historical resident counts.
So I just looked it up. The piece that they're missing is the intra out. So that the kids who came in from out of district, and because the way that it was formatted,
Okay.
they were focused on current year forward. I can tell you that, I can give you the numbers for those
Yeah,
3
that's
years.
why I'm just like, oh, well, we
But it's
don't-
off by 60 to 80 students. So I can give you the exact number. They're all higher, 20, 21, and 22, but
Yeah,
But then so would the forward numbers too, that not include the numbers.
because we do true numbers in 23 and then move up from there.
so it's like
They
if
do
you was
it.
an X out.
They do.
Yeah, they should look like
Maybe this
it's not.
ratio is like
Yeah.
kind of
I
relevant.
don't understand why it's on the chart.
Yeah.
I mean, it really places the entire chart into question because we can't rely on the numbers previously. How can we rely on the numbers in the future?
Don't look at those numbers, just look at 20.
But are they able to calculate that? Or I mean, if they weren't able to calculate this?
Well, they haven't ever had accurate projections since I've been on the board.
And I'll tell you, it wasn't about not being able to calculate it, it was what we were asking him to do, because normally they feed everything into their spreadsheet, into the different algorithms, whereas what we did, and often they run their calculations based on CBED's date, October 5th with the numbers. So what Davis was able to do is we actually said, we would like to be able to look at because there were projections for what enrollment would look like in 2023. And then our projections came in lower than we were anticipating. So what we asked Davis to be able to do is saying, looking at our numbers in 2023, those are not, so the orange-ish column, Those are not estimates, those are the number of our students who are in our classrooms as of that day. And then and so from that 364 number in kindergarten, that's where we were able to calculate, based on the number of students that were born in our area 5 years prior, that's when we were able to calculate what is that capture rate of students. So kids 5 years ago, this is how many were born. When 364 of them showed up, that let us know we then realized 59% of those students
So
showed
this is,
up.
yeah, but are you capturing the students that have, in those out years, 24 through 30, are you only just looking at the capture rate? Or are you also adding in other students that move in from out of the district?
Correct, yes, those are in the true numbers moving forward, and what he also then will do, Erica, is it then is also capturing, you'll see that cohort from 347 growing up to 366.8. When we lower the kindergarten cohort, it then becomes the first grade cohort. What it's doing also in this is it's also then calculating the percentage of, we talked about that cohort survival rate, so we see then that by the time we end up typically having more students enroll in first grade than we did in kindergarten. So the kindergarten class grows over time.
So this includes both the cohort survival rate, being 1, 3, or whatever it is, and that also includes people moving into transfers into the district. I just think we should probably write that on the right side of this slide, because otherwise it's unclear if this is only reflecting capture rate, especially the confusion about the historical numbers.
And also the percentage that you're using, which is the 59%, are you gonna give us, the next slide's gonna be?
The next slide does say it.
Different.
They just did that.
Okay, I see.
To be honest, I mean, it's all looking at what we're supposed to.
Yeah.
Correct. And that is absolutely what this
That's
is.
what we
It's
asked
looking
for.
at projections, and it also is, we also then will be looking, as we get out to 2030, as we continue to project out further, any demographer, anybody who's in the business of projecting is going to say the projections are less reliable as we go further.
Do they have any kind of rate by which they're correct? Do they say this is really a plus or minus range of X percent or anything like that?
Yeah, like a standard deviation, no, it didn't give us that. So, and then to your point, Catherine, so on our next slide, then what we did is then we asked for kind of, what's that medium range projection? What might that look like? And so we noted that in the last 2 years, we received, prior to this year, the 2 years prior to that, we were capturing about 70% of students that were born. And so again, believing that that 59% is from this current year is really an outlier. I don't think we anticipated that it's going to continue to be at 59%. That really seemed really out of left field compared to all of the other numbers.
In the past year, starting back, what did you start?
But that's going to be my next slide.
Okay. Right.
That'll be our next slide. So then we tried looking for that middle of the road projection. So we looked at a 69% capture rate. What might that look like? And so what you'll see is moving from 2023 to 2024, we can see a total annual change of about 160, reduction of about 116 kids, and so on. And then if you go to the last one we captured is we went back since 2015, I believe it was. So we went back to 2015 and looked historically, since we've been looking at analyzing capture rates, and we were able to come up with a 74% capture rate. So again, we have our low projection, we had a middle projection, and then we had a higher end projection of a 74%.
Even if you're capturing 71%, the total number is less.
Yes, it is less, but what happens then is it's showing that lower kindergarten class moving through and then looking at how they then project through the
But if you were,
system.
like, I'm just saying, in 2015, you were capturing 74% of 5,000, whereas now you're capturing 74% of 3.
It's 74% of the number of children that were born that year. It's not the whole enrollment. It's looking at, so our birth rates have.
Predicting then how many children are going to be born also.
Yeah.
Well, that's also prediction though, right?
It sounds like they're telling us to expect the worst and hope for the best, right? Or I don't know how.
But are we only using, so going out to 2030, we can't possibly be using people that are born yet?
So, yeah. The last couple of years, they do sort of an average
this current year, looking 5 years back, was actually the high level. It was the highest level of diversity we experienced 5 years ago. And looking forward, the students that we do know that those birth rates are lower for our area.
But looking out to 2030, we don't know. I mean, that's why we also look back to what we're seeing in the 2018s. We can see it's really a crystal ball when you get that far.
So then what we looked at was trying to identify what that projection might mean with regard to full-time equivalents, what it might look like with regard to staffing. So when we were budgeting for the 23-24 school year, we were budgeting, anticipating that we would have 177 FTEs, 177 sections of students. When in reality, when the numbers came through, this current year, we ended up having 173 classrooms. So that then we realized a projected difference of 4 FTEs that were not utilized. What we then will do is we calculate the average teacher costs. So between our median salary for teachers across our district, then once you calculate pension costs, insurance, everything, all in expenses, or we budget for a teacher expense of $143,000. So then what we did is when we hop over to the 24-25 capture, it's looking at that span between what a high number might be, and Doug, you've said in the past, and I'm going to be very cautious here, these are really kind of like totally what you said in the past, but really looking at our best guesses right now, because kids don't come in those neat little packages of 22 exactly at 25, and so it really is looking at our projection about how many sections we anticipate that we need.
Are you building in a buffer then? Are you building in a buffer as you make these calculations?
Correct, that's what we were projecting. We looked back at what that kind of buffer looked like this year to figure out, and then we just built in that same buffer throughout.
And then just refresh your memory of what the class size ratios are.
Correct, so in all of these, they're continuing our current class sizes. So K through 3, it's at a cap of 22, and 4 through 6, it's at a cap of 25. So then in 24-25, again, when we were developing the budget, we still budgeted for the 177 FTEs. If the numbers come through next year at the higher range of capture, we're anticipating we might see about 169 sections that we might need, or if they were to come in at that low end of 59% capture, we then would be looking at needing about 165 classrooms. And then going down to the next row within that blue, then that would show from the projected difference. So we're already realizing a difference of 4 classrooms from budgeting originally from the 177 into the 173. But then when we go from the 177 to the 169, then that would be in the savings, so to speak, 8 FTEs that aren't spent, which would total $1.1 million. And then if it were on the low end capture was to we then would be looking at potential savings of $1.7 million. And then moving on to 25 and 26. And then I will also note that as you're looking at those dollars, then those are cumulative as you go down year to year.
Okay, but
Oh, they're not?
That's each year.
Oh, sorry.
It's that year's. It's not.
they're just an average of the FTE cost teacher.
No, we have an adjusted average FT, and it's not cumulative. That is for that year in that row. If you had 18, so if you go to the far right, the low capture rate, if there were 18 difference, we only had 159 FTE, and we budgeted 177. The difference in costs versus budget would be 2.5 million for that 1 year,
For
in
that
that
1 year.
one column.
It's basically 18 times 143.
Correct.
That's exactly what it is. But
That's
then
not
savings
exactly
then
right.
would be realized from year over year to year.
It's not really the right amount of savings, but because the cost would go up even if just up a column. True.
Yeah,
That's
and this
correct.
is a very general.
I'm just saying
because-
that's like the maximum savings, right? Is that 2.574, but really it would be lower than that because the cost per teacher.
Yeah.
Well, no, I see what you're saying, no, right, because it's still 177 times the cost per teacher, right?
It's just that 18 is not times each teacher comes to. So it depends on what their sound FTE is.
And then there's the middle capture rate, which.
We
Somewhere in between,
So-
somewhere in between.
And to be honest, it Guaranteed, it won't be exactly that number. So, you know, we're doing a projection on a projection to get you to the 18 FTE, but this gives you at least some context of what we're trying to provide.
Think about it in terms of classrooms, that's also helpful way to look at. If you think about it in terms of what you said, in terms of classrooms,
Yeah.
they're not just teachers, they're also classrooms that are or are not in use.
Which is a great segue.
The bathrooms.
It did.
Now let's move on.
You're reading ahead?
And so then, with capacity, we shared a slide similar to this in a budget workshop in, I think it was March of 22, where we gave some district-wide capacity. If you look at 18-19, that we give basically a baseline before we started the bond program. And so what this shows is our total classrooms. We've talked about portable classrooms and reducing that over time, and then kindergartens with restrooms. And so this is before we started any of the bond programs, so we still had Del Mar Heights in its original form. The 8 schools, Pacific Sky hadn't been built yet. We'll note that total classrooms are all classrooms, so it's K-6, it's any specialty classroom, STEAM, special ed, ASP, any classroom that we're using. And then the portables, I just note that it includes ASP, CDC portables at Ashley Falls, because when we look at our program, we have, you know, classrooms we're modernizing, but that is a program that should we remove those portables, we'll have to find a space for. So we just keep that in mind as we have the total numbers. In 23-24 this year, we have 297 total classrooms. We've brought on some temporary classrooms to offset the demolition of Del Mar Heights. We've built Pacific Sky. We actually were down to 23 kinders with restrooms before Pacific Sky opened, and we're back up to 26 because Pacific Sky had 3 kindergartens with restrooms. And then when Del Mar Hills is completed, we would also have Del Mar Heights completed. So 25, 26 is there because it shows a completion of the 2 schools and the 2 projects that are right on the horizon. And those 2 projects actually impact the kindergarten classrooms with restrooms, which is a question that's been brought. Once we get those 2 completed, we add 3 back in for Del Mar Heights, 2 for Del Mar Hills, and that would get us to really the maximum number of kindergartens with restrooms within our current facilities plan. So we would end up with 31. We'd be close to our pre-bond number of total classrooms at 309 because we'll be removing some portables and some of the adjustments that come with that. And we'd be down to 19 portable classrooms because we will have taken a bunch off of Del Mar Hills Academy's campus as well.
We still, we're still gonna have 19 purple classrooms left.
Yes. That includes 5 ECDC, ASP at Ashley Falls. There are 6 or 8 at Sage Canyon is the other big location. Then we have a couple more at CDM.
Did you say that?
That are not coming, that we're not scheduled to come off.
Not that they're not scheduled to come off. In 25, 26, they will still be on and still be part of our program. And so I'm just giving you where we are. We'll be in 25, 26. By the end of the bond program, we would be removing most, if not all of this.
Did you say 5 at the ECDC?
Yes, that kind of row of them that we have on the ECDC
So
ASP.
basically, we should be thinking about 290 classrooms, of which 31 are kinder with restrooms.
Correct. And if we get down all the way down to 290, that's why I have the little asterisk for, you would then need to move ASP ECDC into a school location. So there are some logistics that come with getting all the way, removing all of the portables.
But there's space for them.
Yeah, there likely is space based on where we're looking right now, but.
You're just saying to move the, literally move the classrooms, you're not saying there's not room for them.
I'm not saying there isn't room for them.
Okay.
Any questions on capacity or?
How does
Right, how many
removing?
kindergarten class, sorry,
Good.
how many kindergarten do we have?
We have 20 and a half.
Yeah, that would be my question then, in looking at all these projections, how many kindergarten, pure kinder, not talking about the TK, kindergarten classrooms with restrooms do we need based off all these different projections? Is it like 20 every time? So that leaves us with 11 every year?
About, yes, because if we look at this year, if we look at our the fact that we have 364 students this year and they spec out about to 20, they are at 20 and a half, and then knowing depending on where those numbers might fluctuate from one school site to the other. And as we're seeing that kindergarten enrollment continue to, that'll be the number for us to continue to monitor, is what that projection looks like. So that would, I just think it's
Yeah,
safe
like,
to say.
I'm gonna look at the medium one, it's there, it's in the middle, yeah, it's a little, it's close to 364, I mean, but it does vary.
Right.
You might
But I guess,
be
like,
21.
And I can add to that, you know, if you have a school that has 3 kindergartens, the enrollment has to drop by a third before you get down to 2 kindergartens. So you're dropping class size for kindergarten before you drop the entire classroom, right?
Well, but you have 11, 10, 9 to 11
Yeah.
restrooms, classrooms with
Right.
restrooms in the district.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there intent to remove all the portables? Is that kind of,
That's the plan.
that was the
part of the
plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I understand, I mean, so I mean,
This
that's.
just shows what it would be still in 25, 26, but
Okay,
yes,
so,
that's the
so
plan.
with that said, I mean, some of these kids are in the ECDC, those are, you know, younger kids. Where do those?
They're K through 6 are at EC, oh, sorry, I thought you said ASP, my apologies.
And so where do those kids get moved to? Would that also be moved into a younger classroom that would affect your number of kindergarten classrooms? Like the ECDC and like ASP, would those?
I don't think that's an ethical option, that's an enterprise program.
Sorry, you're saying that the ECDC is in portables right now?
Correct, they're in portables, and so to
Yeah, but
remove the
that's something
portables,
that
they need to go into
parents-
regular classrooms, is what they were suggesting.
Well, the ECDC is regulated, right? It's a licensed program.
Yes.
And that licensure requires bathrooms.
Yes.
And so if we have to go from a portable with a bathroom, we have to go to a non-portable with a bathroom, right? And in order to do that, we have to take up one of these kinder bathrooms. So in reality, what does that mean for the bigger picture is really the answer we need to get. Is it really 11 classrooms if we have to move
Wait,
these?
when did this regulation that you're referring to, I mean,
It's
why are
It's a
we?
preschool, it's licensed by the state.
Some of the portable classrooms have bathrooms.
Yeah, I know, but we don't have to move them out of portables, that's not like something that's being said.
Yeah,
You
that's the
just
plan
said
to get
that.
rid of all the portables.
Okay, so for ASP and for ECDC, there's no regulation, like there is for TK, there's a regulation that
There's
TK can't be
ECDC has a
in,
regulation by way of licensure.
that they can't be in a portable?
No, that they can't be in a room without a bathroom.
Right, but there's a regulation that TK can't be in a portable. So the regulation that it can't be in a portable,
So the issue you're talking about is whether we get all the portables on campus.
I don't think there's a need to get ASP and ECDC portables on campus.
And that's the discussion that we need to have, is whether or not.
If we
ECDC Right.
Restrooms in actual classrooms
Well,
for
ECDC,
TK.
ECDC needs restrooms, whether it's
Sure.
portable or not.
Exactly, they have the option, they don't have to be in.
The question becomes. do we get
And
rid
my
of the
issue
portables?
also is, you know, barring the, I mean, special needs preschool, but the other preschool is funded by private parent, tuition. And that's not something we're paying for as a district. So to take up our classroom spaces for a privately funded preschool is, I mean,
I'm just, the point was made that we're getting rid of all the portables. So if we're getting rid of all the portables, we're getting rid of the ECDC too. Is that something you're suggesting?
I guess that's what I was asking. So I don't know if you guys have an answer, like in terms of what the plan was in regards to ECDC.
We do not yet have a plan.
So it's a little bit of discussion here.
How many portables have bathrooms?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can get that number pretty easily, but I don't have that.
and I just have to say, I mean, we were talking earlier about satellite kitchens and how we would plan well for that in the past. I have all along thought, especially with all these, you know, Pacific Sky Bill, Belmar Lakes Bill, I questioned all along, are we building enough classrooms with restrooms to be able to fully implement traditional kindergarten for years and So these enrollment projections now are showing a big decline, and then what if, you're talking about COVID-19 or like some other financial crisis, well, what if there's a big baby boom ahead? Do we have enough restrooms in classrooms to be able to support transitional kindergarten? I don't think that was considered well enough when we were making our decisions on new schools or schools that we built. And I mean, we've got our health modernization too. Question, we need to be able to provide this program to our students. It's an important educational program that we're not offering.
And so, I think we've built to what, the focus to this point, and to add more bathrooms and restrooms, is something that.
Yeah, we've got $1 million in restroom, like a satellite kitchen.
Well, a classroom and a restroom is going to be.
Or a restroom into a classroom.
It's going to be pretty costly.
So just, I think the numbers that, I think they were missing, what I asked about how many portable setbacks, and then the other part is how many classrooms of, ECDC, kids or other mandated things that we have to have, do we need to add to 20.5 to know our total number of classrooms that need bathrooms? Like, so those two numbers would help kind of round out this information. Yeah.
And if I could just throw out there, to kind of those unforeseen planned things, you're talking about the satellite kitchens, perhaps adding some retrofit bathrooms and some
I mean, I'm gonna add to this, I don't know if it's coming up in the future slide, but with the addition of TK, do we have enough classrooms and restrooms?
It depends on how many classes of TK we have.
Well, 20.5, right?
So I think right now we have 10 classrooms that we could add TK, but then that may reduce a little bit by looking at how many we would need for the ECDC if we were to move ECDC into classrooms if there was a need for restrooms. So,
Well, will we be faced with the decision about maintaining ECDC or having transitional kindergarten? Is that something that is that
I think a lot of people who are going to ECDC will go to transitional kindergarten, so that solves some of the problem.
right, but for the other kids, there's still a installation that needs to be considered. Well, I mean, we're
Mandated to.
it's not on the table right now, but it's something that we're gonna apparently have to think about.
What I would go back to the unforeseen possibilities. We couldn't predict a few years ago about food service need. And we don't know in 3 years' time the legislature changes the rule on transitional kindergarten and mandates that everybody does it. Today, that's not the case. There's a legislative landscape, as I understand it. But it's always a risk that we'll be told you have to go from deciding what number of TK classrooms you want to, you must have all of it. So I do think that we should have that as in our back pocket as a potential, I won't call it a risk, but a potential change in the legislative landscape, just like the food ones.
Yeah, and then related to that, we will want to know, well, which classrooms can have bathrooms added to them, and how much per class. So I don't think, without doing a classroom by classroom analysis, we can definitely do some sort of back of the envelope of like, you need this many square feet, and where would you put the bathroom, just stuff like that, to understand what is even feasible. We working it out of our project.
And just, to your point, I think only 8 school districts in the state don't think that it's required.
What I'm saying is that it's a number between 0 and 20 classrooms. If the legislature tomorrow says everyone must have it, including those 8, then we have to plan for that. if it's left to our discretion, it's anywhere between 0 and 20.
It's an unfunded mandate.
Right.
It's all perspective. This district is very wealthy compared to LCFF districts.
Whether we have the money, or whether it's funded by the legislature, is what I'm talking about.
Our property taxes are how we're funded. So they view this as the way we fund our
We're just talking about
programs.
a mandate.
Say, right now, we're not required to do TK.
That's your
If we were-
opinion. That's your opinion.
That's actually the law. So if
That's-
if that was
Let's
the
get a
case.
judge to decide it.
Okay. So anyway, but I hear your point, Alan, yes, that if we were legally required to offer TK, we would need to know all these factors. And so it'd be helpful to know as far as unforeseen costs, what would the cost be to build the shortfall in bathrooms? in a process.
And there again, the definition of
What defines the
What
bathroom?
defines that? I mean, it doesn't need to have.
Pretty safe setup.
How many
Doesn't need a
sinks and
sink.
how many, I'm sure it needs a sink and a toilet, but, I mean, what is the minimum requirements for this?
I'm sorry, can I step back a little bit? How many kinder classrooms do we have? How many kinder classes do we have?
20 and a half.
I'm sorry,
20 and a half.
20 and a half, okay.
Table.
Got it, okay. So then it'd be like 5.5 spaces that we have, actually.
Actually, so wait, if we have 20 and a half kindergarten classes, then if you were to translate that same number of kids to TK, you would need more classrooms because you can't have fewer kids in a class, right? Or maybe you don't, just some more teachers.
More teachers.
Okay, so yeah, so it's another, you need another 20 classrooms. We would have 10, minus the portables that have bathrooms. That's the number. And then we look at the cost.
No, it's not, it's not minus, okay, so kinder with restrooms, 2025, 2026, it says 31.
We have 20, 21 kindergarten classes, so there's 10 left over.
Right,
So there's 10 classrooms that are available.
yeah.
Then when the portables go away, you can move the kids
Why
that are in the
why are
portables
we
and bathrooms.
taking the ECDC and ASP portables away?
But, well, that's
Well,
the
that's
question.
the current facilities plan, but, you know, it could be changed.
It could be
So we
changed.
just need to
Okay,
know
so
the
I
number.
was under the impression that we're doing that for our, like, classrooms and not necessarily for ASP and ECDC.
Right, the plan, per the direction of the board, was not to replace portables. So as they age out, et cetera, we would not reinvest in more portable structures because of the capacity that has been added with 9 schools. But it doesn't, that's why in 25, it still shows some of them there because they're still going to be there and using them.
Yeah, I just think TK is a pretty huge priority, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people. So to not, you know, to put ASP or ECDC portables ahead of TK just
So
doesn't make sense.
the other thing I would ask as we think about TK is learning from other districts. Like, given broad brush, you can build what you want, whenever you want. Are they, with the ratio requirements, I think it's 12 to 1, now it might be 10 to 1, are they choosing to put, 20 to 24 TK children in a classroom with the 2 instructors, or given a choice, are they going to an environment where they can accommodate 10 and only 10, in the classroom? What's the preferred practice? So thinking, where the puck's going to be. If TK were implemented in a perfect world, are districts choosing to just repurpose a kindergarten classroom? Or are they thinking about how a TK classroom might look a little different? And I don't know the answer to that.
So those are conversations that I'm having with other districts throughout this state about what they're doing with TK, so those who have implemented TK, so we should have some more information when we come back to the October workshop about that.
And I would just like to say that moving ECDC into kinder bathroom classrooms shouldn't be our highest priority over TK. I think TK should take the priority. And ECDC's been operating pretty well already. So simply by virtue of the directive that was made to get rid of all the portables, I don't think that that should trump, having TK. right?
Yeah, yes, and at the same time, you want to plan ahead when those portables are no longer functional, and they're like, oops, we forgot to plan to have a place to put those kids, because we're not gonna get new portables.
But what is the lifespan of those I mean, we have portables for,
Some of them, we have portables that are old.
right, but the ones that are being used for ECDC is what I'm talking about. Those, we just did the ECDC renovations, not too long ago. I can't imagine there's the crap that are falling apart. And if we have a capital improvement or maintenance program to try and maintain those in a way that allows us to have a TK program.
And I personally, I would be willing to vote again and change and have ASP or ECDC in a portable, especially ASP, because they're not there it's not like they're there even in that room. Like kids are in there for an hour, a couple hours, and they're outside playing, and they go back in. I mean, I guess ECDC is a little bit different. They're there for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think I would kind of agree with what Erica was saying. I mean, it's something, it's not necessarily the priority, but it's something to keep an eye on, because the portables are getting older. It's something to kind of just keep track of, their lifespan of them. But if you were to ask me, you want TK rooms or use them for ECDC, obviously TK. I think what people have already asked this, but what I'd like to see is just if you were to if it was a full contingent of a TK equivalent to a kindergarten class, and the necessity of the rooms, the amount of rooms, what would that cost? How do you get there? Because obviously we don't have 20 and 20 right now. But what would it take to get there? And if we can, I guess in the meantime, what is like the suggestion to do? What is like the recommendation in terms of a TK program? How to size it?
And if I can add one little nuance that Catherine made me think about, if we were to have TK available in the community, how many ECDC students would shift out of ECDC into TK, and what would that do to ECDC? Would it make, let's say 10 shifted out, would that make 10 more slots for younger kids, or would it just reduce the census by 10? And just sort of model out what the movement would be in ECD in reaction to having TK available.
Well, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, that's a lot of data. Thank you for putting it all together.
So we've obviously taken a bunch of notes, and there are next steps that come from that. We'll also be bringing current priorities and some fiscal impacts and looking at potential priorities as part of the next meeting in October, where we will look really overall at the overall budget and visioning. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Okay. I guess we're ready to adjourn. 6.1, adjourn the meeting. Anybody want to move to adjourn?
I'm gonna adjourn.
All right, anyone want a second? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. We will adjourn at 7 p.m.
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much.